On June 4th, Seven Film goes goth like never before. Danse Macabre Volume 3 features four restored classics of Spanish Gothic horror, all scanned from their negatives with over 8 collective hours of special features. Necrophagus is a worldwide Blu-ray premiere now restored uncut. The four-part anthology Cake of Blood is available for the first time outside of Spain. Cross of the Devil, the Hammer director John Gilling gets its first ever home video release in English, and Leon Klimovsky's vampire classic The Night of the Walking Dead can be experienced like never before in an all-new 2K scan. Purchase Danse Macabre Volume 3 from the Severin web store and get 50% off on Danse Macabre Volume 1 and Volume 2. On June 4th, Danse Macabre Volume 3 delivers Spanish Gothic horror at its very best, only from the fine folks at Severin Films. Experience I Saw the TV Glow, now playing in select cities. From A24 and starring Justice Smith and Bridget Lundy Payne, teenager Owen is just trying to make it through life in the suburbs when his classmate introduces him to a mysterious late-night TV show, a vision of a supernatural world beneath their own. In the pale glow of the television, Owen's view of reality begins to crack. Critics are raving this coming-of-age masterpiece will follow you home. Don't miss I Saw the TV Glow, certified fresh and now playing in select cities nationwide May 17th. Get tickets now.
Hello, and welcome to Fangoria's Colors of the Dark podcast. I'm your co-host, Rebekah McKendry, and with me is Elric Kane. How are you doing tonight?
How are you doing? What the hell are you doing?
Oh my God.
I mean,
what?
You know,
What?
you've
What?
got a
It's
weird
been a
screen
whole
name.
night.
You don't have the same computer. We're 30 minutes late.
My computer died tonight, y'all. It's been a thing. So I'll warn you tonight for my first podcast ever. I am rolling without any notes. So this is going to be crazy because I usually have notes about everything that I've watched in front of me. And tonight, all I have now is my letterbox and my Goodreads.
And we have 30
that's
minutes
it.
less.
And we have like 30 minutes less because I just killed 30 minutes trying to get my fucking screen to work and it still wouldn't goddamn work. So yeah.
But you have a cool t-shirt. That's something. Go repo, man.
I do. So yeah, Brian Sauer, who co-hosts Elric's other show, Pure Cinema, with him, has been making these like awesome written and directed by shirts. But the reason that I love them is that they are done, like they're literally taken from the movies. Like, so it's like the screen grab from the title credits in a movie. And so I'm wearing Alex Cox's Repo Man tonight, but I also got De Palma and I'm waiting for a Doris Wishman.
Yeah, I think it's funny. I told him you were waiting for when he already was in the works. So
oh, hell
it's
yes.
on the way. But that's enough time advertising our other co-host, Brian. Hello, Brian. He'll get that joke. All right. But we have movies to talk about, new movies, and we have a countdown list. What better episode to do a countdown list than an episode where you have no notes? This will be
none. So I'm literally rewriting my list on a sheet of notebook paper in front of me. I feel so just terrestrial and linear right now without anything in front of me.
Well, I'll give you a little breathing room for about 40 seconds to talk about a movie you didn't see. That way you'll have time to readjust.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I'm kind of flying here.
I'm going to talk about the incredible film Tarot, director Spencer Cohen, Anna Hallberg.
Which I did
you
not
did not
see.
get to see. We were meant to go together. But then your reading came up negative, so you didn't come from your tower. And this is a movie that is, I would say it is very generic. Everyone kind of shat on this movie. Actually, it did fairly well financially, surprisingly.
So financially, it did well.
Yeah.
That was kind of, I learned this in a meeting, like financially, it did okay. It just did not do well critically.
Yeah, like it's, it is not a good movie. I went a couple weeks after the kind of onslaught, so I had no expectations. I wanted to see a horror film late at night. Went super late with Brian, actually, and it's kind of fun if you're in the mood just to see a horror film that night, and it did satisfy certain things. It is very generic. Like in terms of characters, stock characters are pretty bad. On the plus side, the art of the actual tarot, it's a really interesting tarot deck artistically, and all the characters on the tarot deck, the Hanged Man and all the different things are then replicated as the kind of characters or creatures who then kill each character, and those are pretty cool.
Those were all designed by a friend who I been interacting with online, and I covered one of his books a couple of weeks ago, a guy named Trevor Henderson. And
Yeah, I
he is
remember
just
him.
he's well known for creating things like Siren Head and a lot of other, I'll call them kind of like Reddit thread or like creepypasta characters. He's just really good at making monsters. And so yeah, he designed all of those for
No,
tarot.
they kind of are Cenobite
Tarot,
like.
tarot. We argued about
It's
the
definitely
proper
tarot, but
pronunciation.
I believe. But anyway, it is not any really unique. I think for me, it's the kind of movie that if it had been really straight to video, in the 90s, I probably would have been snobby about it, but eventually watched it and gone, it's actually pretty well made. The filmmaking itself isn't bad. It's very jump scary. If the characters and dialogue were, worked on, it might be something you'd rewatch. But I do think it had an interesting design from start to finish, and you could go do worse late at night some nights if you're just looking to be somewhat entertained. But doesn't offer much new to the genre. And a couple of films on today's thing kind of tried different things with the genre, so there'll be some interesting things to discuss today. But anyway, Tarot is not one of them. What about a little movie we both saw? I know I watched it because McGarris had said it was his favorite movie of the last year, and I don't know if that's what you saw to push play. Or no, I think I then told you, but you watched it before me. We can't say too much about it, but the movie's called Coffee Table.
So I watched this because you had said it's
Okay.
like the most fucked up
Right,
film
and I got that from
ever.
McGarris. McGarris had posted
McGarris.
saying, and he has a very dark sense of humor. He's such a nice man, but like underneath that, very dark red sense of humor, like Toby Hooper.
Yes.
And
so
boy,
I had watched it for that reason. And yeah, we can't say much
not
about
really.
this. And unfortunately, I don't even have the director's name in front of me.
K. Cassis. K. Cassis.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I will say that somebody else, when I mentioned this one online, was immediately like, oh shit, you got to see his prior film, which is apparently kind of just tonally kind of the same. This is a dark comedy, like quite possibly one of the darkest comedies that I have seen in years, like Big Bad Wolves, or like what was the one that Nicole Kidman did a couple of years ago that was like also this like
To
beats
Die
those.
For or something?
No, it was one about her kids. Not Winded Fawn.
Rabbit
Oh
Hole?
gosh, I can't.
I don't think that was funny.
It was a Nicole Kidman.
Okay.
Anyway, well, I'll remember as soon as I stop talking about it. But like super dark comedy to the point where you're like, holy fuck, I can't believe I'm laughing about some of this. And we can't tell you much, but I will give you just the lead in. It is a husband, a wife, and their baby. They are having friends and family over, and they head to a furniture store to buy a new coffee table. And there's a whole kind of argument over this cheaper coffee table, but then there's this really fancy high-end coffee table that has this glass top that is supposedly unbreakable.
With two nude woman bodies, gold plated underneath it. And it's probably honestly, if you watched it just for there's obvious reasons to watch this movie, but we don't want to get too into it. But if you just watched it for the fight between a married couple, maybe the most the most realistic portrayal of a married couple pissed off at each other, the husband doing things just to spite her doing, mocking him. I mean, it's really kind of brilliantly written, to be honest. I was pretty amazed at how they got that nailed.
I have had that exact same argument in an IKEA. I would bet dollars to donuts, but yeah, maybe not over the gold nude table. Yeah. They don't sell that at IKEA, and God, I wish they did. Yeah. But anyway, they're buying this. He ends up getting it kind of to spite her, and it is supposed to be this unbreakable coffee table. And he gets home, and she goes out to run errands, and he starts putting it together, and he realizes that there's a screw missing from this amazingly expensive coffee table, and that's about as far as we can take you.
Which is literally like nothing. I mean, there's no way to sell this movie. I kind of imagined what I thought the movie would be about, and I was close, but I could still not prepare myself for what it was about. So
no, because it's how far it goes. Yeah. It's one of those where it just keeps getting worse and worse and escalating, and nothing is quite as intense as the initial shock of what's going to happen, but then it just gets worse. And
I would say the first half's a dark comedy. And then it becomes, I don't even know if there's a term for what the last half is. I would almost call it despair comedy, because it's not funny anymore, but you're despairing as you watch the reactions in this. It's impossible. I know we really can't spend more time. It's a bummer. This would be fun. On our Patreon, on our next one, we'll have to make sure we do a totally spoiler convo about it, because it's too, I kind of really do want to know if they go too far. Because it's rare for me to feel like a movie in a moment gets going, oh my God, has that gone too far? If I'm shocked at something these days, I'm always like, oh, that's very rare.
I don't I
Very
don't
rare.
think so because I mean, and it does go too far.
Yeah.
I think that that's the amusement of it. But at the same time, when I posted it online, I was like hesitant to post
Yeah.
this one and like proselytize it on my Instagram and be like, holy shit, you need to watch this because it is so shocking. Like there's someone out there who's immediately going to be like, I can't believe she laughed at this, heathen, Satan. And that's fine. But that said, like, immediately it was met with all of these people that were like, holy shit, I loved this, wildest film of the year. Like, I feel like it's all types of fucked up, but there's a certain amount of number of people who that kind of hits with, that there is something kind of cathartic about that. And again, it's the idea that it is, it's
It's shock factor. It's a
goes
shock.
with horror.
Yeah. Don't watch it if you don't really like super, like if you watch Happiness and you're like offended that about one of the characters in that or something like that, you probably don't need to watch this, because you have to be willing to go into a very dark space, and you have to go there lightly, otherwise you'll never make it back out. But if you do like those kind of films, we do recommend it because it was really something unique.
Killing of a Sacred Deer.
Oh, right, of course, yeah.
It took me like, I had to stop.
For some reason, I never remember her, even though she's great in it. I think of that as the Colin Farrell movie, weirdly. So
really, I always think it's like one of those like super dark comedy.
Oh, it is. No, it's funny. It's real dark fun.
Yeah,
you're right. Actually, it's about that dark, but this has no, they both have very dark things in it.
No, I'd say this one gets darker. Coffee Table, I found, or more of just, I found how confrontational it is.
I think this has the darkest. Maybe the darkest thing I've seen in a movie. It might be bold, but I think it's pretty much there. All right. So we'll leave it at that. Use your imagination. But I wish I had that table. It's a beautiful table.
It's a gorgeous table. Absolutely gorgeous table. Tragic table. Okay. So I'm gonna first say, because I had details on this, but my notes are toast. So let's just plug it. Killer Clowns from Outer Space just did a really awesome new Steelbook 4K from Shout Factory. Nice. So I rewatched Killer Clowns from Outer Space with my kids.
Oh, cool.
And it was like so much fun because I was probably their age when I watched this, and it was such just a magical memory for me, and really, just became one of my favorite, I'll say, like, gateway horrors of the late 1980s thereabouts.
It's more magic than a lot of other movies, because I remember seeing it, not knowing anything about it too, and just the effects were so kind of magical when you're young. You're like, wow, how did they do that? Which is
and it still looks so good. That says something for the Kyoto brothers, is it still looks so good. And those clowns are still so fucked up looking, and it's still like giant cotton candy bags and everything like that. So this, I at least want to plug it. I had a whole spiel on Killer Clowns, but you've all seen that already. So let me just say, the 4K, fucking beautiful.
Hard to fathom that there aren't like a couple sequels to that from back in the day. It's one of the weirdest to me. But even in the 80s, you would think, or late 80s, early 90s, you would just think they would have made one, because they're the ones who have the goods. It's crazy.
Every couple of years, even still to this day, I hear they're doing a remake of Killer Clowns from Outer Space. So it's getting rebooted. The Kyotos are attached again. I have heard it happen so many times that I wish it would happen. There was a stretch where I kept hearing TV show, and then it's going to be a web show. And I don't know. It just has never happened, and it needs to.
Yeah.
So with that, I will take us to something that we did not watch together, because I know we have a couple more that we did watch both of. I'm going to go to two TV shows that I watched. So I watched Dead Boys Detective Agency. This is what happens when I don't have my notes. Dead Boy Detectives, which was fun. So this just came to Netflix this week. And I wanted to see this because it's a spin-off it's Neil Gaiman. It's a spin-off of his original. I think these characters were originally kind of a spin-off of Sandman, but most recently they were in an episode or two of Doom Patrol. And I always liked the characters. It's basically two dead teen boys who, rather than crossing over to the other side, decide to, solve supernatural crimes. And the world is really big. This is a huge show, like massive effects. It just is a huge, huge world. And it gets really dark because there's demons and murders and things like that. So this, I at least wanted to plug, because this was a really fun show. And it definitely goes horror. But I also wanted to mention the show that it followed up with, because when you're watching Netflix and it like you finish and then it's like you may also like, and it pulled up this show called High School Spirit. And I was like, okay. And I click on it and it stars Peyton List, who I love. And it was somewhat of the same concept. Like I see why Netflix's algorithm kicked it over to me, but done on a much smaller, more realistic base. And it's about a teen girl who is murdered in her high school, but she has no memory of how she dies, nor can she find her body. No one has found her body. But what she quickly discovers is that she is now stuck in this high school with everyone else throughout like the 100-year history of this high school who has died there. So like some members of the marching band who were accidentally hit by a bus in the 70s. There's a football player there. And they so it's like a full history's worth of people who have died in this high school are all stuck in the high school, and they have a support group, and they're all just kind of going through their days. There's one girl who died tripping on acid in the 70s who's like completely whacked out, that comes in and out of scenes because she's like permanently tripping on acid now. But it's Peyton List trying to figure out who killed her and where her body is when she can't interact with anything. And all she can do is kind of stand in the hallway and listen to conversations and kind of cleave what she can out of that. I really liked this. It was small, and sadly, it didn't get renewed for a second season. So you probably not going to really find out who the killer is. But that said, there was something really good about this, and I'm now totally bummed it did not get renewed, because I really enjoyed the first couple of episodes I watched. So the first show, Dead Boy Detective Agency, which is currently on Netflix. And then the second one is called High School Spirits, also on, or High School Spirit, definitely, also on Netflix. So yeah, both of them were really interesting watches.
I think I saw the trailer for the High School Spirit one at one point. It looked kind of cute. But that's one of my problems with TV. It's like, there's nothing worse than investing in something that gets not renewed. It's just the worst.
I know.
I just can't
and it's
do it
such
anymore.
A bummer.
Yeah.
No, and so I like it when I know seasons are ending, like Evil. Evil is coming to an end this season.
Oh, when they know. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, that's been like one of my favorite shows for the past couple of years, but they knew it was coming. So I'm hoping that they give it a satisfying ending. But yeah, like right now, just using this as an example, they're not. But right now, if they were just to be like, From is canceled, because I've gotten so engaged in the show From, and we've been given no goddamn answers about what's happening. If it was to just get canceled right now, I would like have an aneurysm. So
wait, when is the next season of that? I've been waiting for.
It's starting up in a couple of weeks.
Oh, cool.
So, or not a couple of weeks. I think Evil is back in a couple of weeks. From should be shortly thereafter. Because are you caught up on that?
I think I was. Yeah, I think I watched all of the ones that were out. Yeah.
Okay.
From, not of Evil. From. Yeah.
Yeah. Evil is, I highly recommend catching up on.
I know. I started I watched the first season and really liked it, and then just kind of fell off.
I feel like Evil is very much like, kind of demon of the week, supernatural thing of the week, whereas From is very, through line plot heavy. Right. But that said, From has just, so far it's done like the Lost thing, where it's done nothing but give us questions and not really answer any, and the answers that it give you just raise more questions. And so I'm like, God damn it, I need to know what's happening. So I need that.
And that didn't work out for Lost either. So in the end, so I always worry,
because then you have to answer all those threads, and I hope to God they know where they're going, because I'm like, I obsess over that show when it's on, like Googling things to see if there's things I didn't catch. And
Yellow Jackets too. It's like some of these shows, the first season was perfection, and then the second it starts opening up more and more and more, and then by the end you're like, if this ended now, I'd be so annoyed, because it's just making questions, not answers. Quick change of pace, talking about answers and questions. I'll do one that you didn't see, that I wasn't sure if it was still embargoed, but because this will be coming out on Friday, this opens on Friday, and that, because no one's really posted about it yet. The Strangers Chapter 1, directed by Rennie Harlan, opens this Friday. And it is chapter 1 of 3 parts. The next one comes out in a couple months, and the other one after a couple months after that. And
they shot them all back to back.
Shot them back to
they've
back.
already done them.
Yes. And based on because the original novel is bigger than Lord of the Rings, so of course you need 3 movies. Oh no, it's not. It's a fucking movie. What the hell is going on, Hollywood, when you're making 3 chapters of The Strangers, the thinnest of all horror films ever? Like, the original Strangers is probably a half-page scenario, and now you're making 3 films. My brain is melting, and I'm excited in the sense that everyone's like, ooh, 3 films, what's that going to be? And I like Rennie Harlan a lot. I think he makes good movies. I watched this. And I don't want to diss it because it isn't bad. It really isn't. It's totally fine. This would be a great straight to video slasher. Again, 90s perfect straight to video slashers. We would go, oh, it's not as good as, nowhere near as good as the first. It's lacking the high points of that other Strangers movie. I always forget the subtitle, the one we love with the pool scene, which has like two
Strangers at Night, by night.
Yeah, Stranger, which has like 2 or 3 just like banger sequences, like the Carpenter-esque Christine car on fire, the pool. It just has those kind of. This doesn't have either of those things, but it is very much like the first one in terms of pretty A to B. It's Madeline Petch from who I believe she's from the Archie show. What was that called? Riverdale. So she has a huge following. It's her and her boyfriend character or fiance. Not playing the same characters as the original Strangers. They're just a couple. But it's modern. Like they're using, Post-it to get, they're using apps to get food delivered and stuff. Their car breaks down in a small town, I think it was Oregon, and they are forced to get a Airbnb cabin. And they're staying there, and guess what happens? The 3 characters knock on the door in the dark and then do the exact same scenes of terrorizing. Now, it's got some creepy sequences, and I won't go much deeper because, to be honest, there wasn't much more than that.
I was going to say, what did it do that was different from the original? Because what was I seeing? I can't even remember what movie I was seeing, but I was watching the trailer for it. And the trailer literally has lines that are almost carbon copies of the original. Yeah. Like, why are you doing this? You were home. Like I was like, oh, that line's in the original. Like there were a couple of lines and scenes that felt like carbon copies from the original. I'll get there. So what did it do that was different?
How do you know that there's more than one film? Richard Brake, the great Richard Brake, who's going to come up again on this episode.
Who we're going to talk about in a sec.
He is in this movie. And so when he was in this movie, like, ooh, Richard Brake's in this movie. He is in this movie for 14 seconds in the background of one shot in a diner. So when I saw that, I was like, well, I'm assuming he comes back in the next movie. The problem with this one, and I will say the problem is knowing this is a trilogy. When it ended, I was like, okay, it didn't offer a single new thing. So to answer your question, there isn't even a twist that I could ruin. There was nothing.
Really?
But that's in this one. So I thought this would end with a big twist to set up the second, at least the version I watched, which was, I could tell it was finished, but they were probably still doing credits and stuff. But again, like I said, it was kind of fun to watch, and I have no problems. It definitely felt like something I'd be watching at home, not at theaters. And if this is a play to have 3 movies playing at theaters, I'm not sure that's going to work out after this first one lands. A la Exorcist. Oh, we're making 3 Exorcist movies. First one tanked. Then what happened? So I'm a little worried about this trend. I'm not a fan of this trend of we're making 3, like it's like make 1, and if it's popular, then maybe do 2 in a row or something. But doing it in
I think part of it, like the Strangers movies, these are pretty. I mean, I'm sure that they still put sizable budgets behind them because they are running theatrical with it. But the whole appeal of the original Strangers was that it was cheap to make. It was like 5 people, 1 location.
It doesn't look cheap, I've got to say. But Rennie Harlin's a really good director, right? So the way he moves camera, the color and stuff, it doesn't feel cheap. It feels like it's not particularly expensive.
He's a great
director. He's really solid.
So I can't imagine him ever letting it look cheap, but I assume it's still
it's still people in a cabin
on the lower budget.
It's still people around a cabin, and it's I don't know what I kind of think that it was a little strange that there was no big hook to get you to the second one. If you were telling me these were Shudder originals, like they would all premiere on Shudder, I would give this like a double thumbs up and be like, great, that makes sense, and I'll go watch the next one when it comes out. But the idea of them being theatrical seems interesting to me. We'll see how it does. I don't want to shit on it because honestly, it was more entertaining than a lot of things that come out. It's just there's nothing different about it. There's nothing new to the table that I could see. Strangers experts sound off and let us know if I'm missing some big twist that I did not see.
But I get why a company would want to do this, why the studio would want to do this, because The Strangers is one of those things that kind of came out of nowhere. I don't think anybody was expecting it to blow up as much as it did. And then those 3 characters kind of became iconic. Like you can't go to a horror convention across America without seeing people dressed up like that.
Yeah.
So just having that kind of brand identity alone, it makes sense that you would want to keep capitalizing on it. And so the idea of, okay, let's turn this into a full franchise. Let's get 3 out in 3 years makes sense. And it is cheaper from a financial standpoint to shoot them back to back if you have that concept already,
Yeah.
than to go back into development, rehire the crew, and get the
Well,
location.
and the stars. Yeah, if you've got a
Yeah.
star, and Madeline Pitch is a star, especially on like social media. I think she's like got like 5 or more million followers. So she's somebody who like
Yeah.
is big. And so I understand that part for sure, and the shooting of it back to back as well. It's hard for me to imagine this being a hit theatrically. I did see the trailer just after I'd seen the film, and the trailer hits like all the big moments. So I mean, it's still fun. There's still some fun scenes, but it's like the trailer is what you're getting. So if you dig the trailer, go see it, check it out, and we'll see what happens with the other 2 parts. I'll be very curious now, I must say. But that was one we got a little sneak at.
Yeah. So let's hit another one that we both watched, which would be Last Stop in Yuma
Last
County.
night? Oh yeah, Last Stop. Yeah, Last Stop.
Last Stop, right? I don't have notes in front of me, so I'm rolling off memory here. So yeah, this one is one that I've been seeing a lot of people post about online. I saw Nick and Tosca write how much he loved this. Jose Canales, who is at Ghost House, and his post about how much he loved it makes sense because this guy just got the new Evil Dead movie. So knowing that this person had gotten the new Evil Dead movie based on this film and how it was doing in festivals last year, Last Stop in Yuma County was one that I had really been wanting to check out. And I will preface this by saying this is not full horror. This is hyper-violent neo-noir Western.
It's just completely neo-noir Western, really. With some horror actors that we've seen before that kind of make it crossover, maybe, you know?
Yeah, it keeps getting compared to like a Tarantino-esque movie, which is why I think it still totally qualifies for this show, because it does have that level of like hyper-violent shock to it, but it is never at any point is like a ghost going to show up and tackle somebody. The setup is that a guy played by Jim Cummings,
love him,
is looking, I know, and he's so good in this. He is looking for gas. He pulls into this desolate gas station, supposed to be in Yuma County, and which is a full desert area in California. It is California, right? It's like right on the border.
Could be set in Arizona or California. I can't remember.
Yeah. So it's somewhere south, Arizona, California area. And I want to say it's right on the border, and I can't remember which state it's in. But anyway, pulls up gas station in Yuma County, and it is the last gas station for 100 miles. And so he is completely empty. He has to get gas. The guy comes out and is like, gas truck hasn't arrived yet. I don't know what the issue is. But if you want to go sit in the diner, he should be here anytime, and then we'll get you on your way. And so Jim Cummings walks into the diner and sits down, and there he discovers Jocelyn Donahue, who runs the diner, playing the waitress and diner owner. And she is immediately like, what can I get you? Fuel truck's not here. That sucks. And then we start hearing tell that there has been a bank robbery nearby, and that there are 2 bank robbers now on the loose. And they show up also looking for gas, get told, gas truck is on the way. Nobody realizes that they're bank robbers at that point. Go take a seat in the diner. Gas truck will be here in a sec. So they go in and sit down as well. And so now we've got kind of a diner full of nice folk and 2 bank robbers who are acting really cagey while they try to figure out if anybody has figured out who they are.
Yeah. Well,
and not having, I'll stop there.
Well, I was just going to say one of them's played by Richard Brake, and
Richard Brake's great.
Richard Brake kind of steals the movie. Jim in the last act is terrific. Richard Brake's really good. Like he's just got a face made for this kind of stuff. I'll be perfectly honest. I'm a little surprised it got somebody in Evil Dead film. Like watching it, I was looking for those moments.
It doesn't feel like it.
It's really well put together. It's a very entertaining movie. Like it's to me a little bit. I don't want to use the word empty because that's the wrong way to put it. But it's like almost like a genre exercise because it's just pure pulp, which is fun. It's like what I would liken it to. It's the kind of movie that if this came out in '98. It would just be straight to video, another Tarantino ripoff that everyone would go, oh, another Tarantino. But with 20 years distance, it feels almost slightly original to suddenly make something like this, even though it isn't. It's got some fun moments, definitely some tribute to Tarantino gunplay type moments. The last act, Jim is really fun to watch. Jim Cummings deal with the situation as this character. It is pure entertainment. I see why it's trending so high. I will say, if you want to see Jocelyn Donahue play a waitress in the '70s in this the exact same location, my friends, The Frontier is also a good movie with a bag of money at stake. These movies could not be. They have a lot of shared DNA, even though they are different movies. So I definitely had a few out of body moments where I was like, wait a minute, Jocelyn, is that the same character? But it isn't the same character. Very different movies though, because that one's like fetishistic about aesthetic, and this one is more about pure pulp entertainment. Like this one's this one's to entertain. Like that's what the meaning for it. Yeah.
This one, it was constantly moving. I think that's what I loved about this most is even when it felt like you were sitting idly in the restaurant, 3 seconds later, something was going to explode. And it constantly was reinventing itself. Like just when I thought like, okay, we have reached the point where there's now a hostage situation. Oh, fuck. Like the turns were ones that I was not really expecting. And and the new characters that come in, like at some point, Alex Iso comes into play. Like there's new characters that come into this and how it keeps kind of reinventing itself throughout and how each of the characters feels so distinctive from each other, and it feels of the time as well, and how the situation just keeps getting worse. Like there was just a lot I liked about this, and best Barbara Crampton usage ever. Like she was great in that role.
Barbara Crampton, Gene Jones. There's a couple interesting horror icons in there.
Yeah, like Barbara's in it for just a moment. She's got like a couple scenes, but she really does steal those scenes in her little cameo. It's cute.
Yeah, it does feel like it's a kind of noir action film that horror fans would definitely enjoy because it moves.
So that is Last Stop, Yuma County, Last Stop in Yuma County, and I believe that is already
on VOD.
Available.
I watched it on VOD.
Yeah, on VOD. Yeah, so that one, Last Stop in Yuma County, definitely check it out. Okay, let's go to one that we both watched, Mind, Body, Spirit. This is a new one that is coming from Welcome Villain. Actually, I think this one may already be available as well.
I think so.
Yeah, so I really liked this one. This is super small, basically a one-hander. It is about a girl who is alone in a house that she has inherited from her grandmother. And you get that she's had this troubled past, that she's had some problems with her parents, that she's had, or specifically her mom, that she's had some problems with suicidal thoughts, that she's had depression problems, but she has decided that she is going to be an online yoga guru. And so she is recording these mental health and yoga videos for YouTube. So full camera setup and everything. She has inherited her grandmother's house. And so she's at her grandmother's house away from her family, recording these videos and kind of just going through everything that her grandmother left. And she didn't know her grandmother really well. Her mom, that was part of the rift, was that her mom had really separated her from her grandmother. And now that she's there going through her grandmother's things, she finds all these books about how her grandmother was a spiritual healer as well. She finds kind of a hidden room. It's the opening scene where she finds all of these books that her grandmother had left, some of them written directly to her, one in particular written directly to her, telling her about all of her different processes that she went through and her spiritual healing processes. And so she decides to follow this book, and she starts on this path of spiritual healing that her grandmother left for her, clearly laying out all of these different kind of rituals and physical actions that she needs to do along the way. And as she moves through them, weird shit starts happening around the house, and you realize that she's unlocking something. This, like I said, it's her talking into a camera. It feels like found footage because it is her talking into her YouTube stream the majority of the time, except for a couple of brief scenes where like one of her friends from high school comes over and helps her out with a video, somebody who's got way more followers than she does. And she's trying to kind of be like this person who's much more of a fitness guru, like health fitness guru when we think about that online. And so she's basically by herself for the majority of the film, talking into a camera, and then scary things happening around her and behind her. I felt like this was really well done. It's not huge, it's not massive. It knew what it was doing though, and I found it to be really compelling.
It's got a similar format to, I was just trying to remember, Alone with You by Emily Bennett.
Yep.
It's that one's, I think that's more my bag. Like, I understand, I figured this one would be a little bit more your bag. I think I like Alone with You a little more because it's a little bit more about the psychology of that situation of talking to yourself and your mom, and everything's a Zoom and you're kind of a shut-in. This has got some clever stuff, and I think your mileage will go with like how captivated you are by the central character and them talking directly to you. I think I'm maybe a little out of patience with watching, but I really like the ritual and I liked where it headed in the actual horror sense of that beat. So there was things I dug about it. I just think I'm maybe watching direct address stuff. I'm a little over it. I don't know.
You're also not like super into yoga, so
Yeah,
I will say that.
I'm certainly not the yoga target audience. That is true.
Like I liked the fact
Yeah.
that it was about yoga because I have not seen a yoga themed horror film before. So I found that to be really fun
Hmm.
in itself, or even like fitness themed horror films. You know, we have a couple, but there's not a lot of them. So I kind of loved that setup. I found it to be really original. And this one is directed, it's two people, Alex Hines and Matthew Miranda. And I might be saying that wrong, but yeah, like there was just something really charming about this. So that is from Welcome Villain, and I believe it is out now. That's Mind, Body, Spirit.
I have one last one, another big new one that a lot of people are waiting on. So I won't say too much because I don't like to get too ahead of it. But I asked the people yesterday if it was too soon. And they said, nope, go for it. In a Violent Nature, the slasher film that everyone's kind of.
You watched it yesterday?
I watched it yesterday. Yeah, just on my as a preview. And this is directed by Chris Nash, who is probably best known. He does things that are very practical effects heavy. Like I think he's an effects guy. So on ABCs of Death 2, he did Zygote, and that is pretty hard to forget because it's the one where the woman ends up birthing herself or something. It's fucking
Yeah.
bonkers. Like it really is
It's
crazy.
the most memorable one
it's
of the entire film.
it's very memorable, and I think he's part of the gang who makes things like he didn't make Psycho Gorman, but he's part of that group of friends and people who do those kind of movies. This has been getting a lot of press. I've been very curious. I think the trailer is
The
pretty
big
active.
press, I'm going to cut
Yeah.
in here just to say it's not just getting a lot of press. The press is that people are vomiting in the screenings, that people have been passing out in the screenings, like that this is one of the most extreme horror films ever made.
Okay, that it isn't, but there is a kill. I saw Joe Lynch's review this morning. There is a kill that is up there with the best on-screen kills in slasher. Like it's clearly commenting on all the craziest Jason kills you've ever seen, and kind of does something that has multiple beats to it, and by the end you're like, all right, that's a showstopper. It's got a couple other good ones too, but that one it's got something special. But what's unique about this, and I think I need to still sit with it a little bit, to be honest, because it is literally not like anything anyone's ever made in this genre, and that can also frustrate, because what this is actually is it's basically like breaking down those conventions. It's frustrating those conventions. So basically, you're, for the most part, at the start you see some off-screen characters taking off this locket off this thing, and somebody talking about this legend, and then literally you see the vengeful spirit being born. You don't see their face, it's all over their back most of the time in this movie. So imagine you're just kind of following Jason, because it's very much a Jason character, and they're just walking for, like, there's scenes like where I could just imagine watching with you where you'd be like, wait, did they just walk for 5 minutes, like, and you're hearing the sound, but it's rhythmic.
You already know. Yeah. I'm frustrated.
Yeah, I already know you're free. But it's more, those moments are like, oh, it's kind of Terrence Malick or something. The closest approximate is definitely that movie Ghost Story from a few years ago, because it's very close in style to that. But mix that with like the Friday the 13th video game, because in a way you feel a little first person-y because the camera's following the character. This is absolutely an intentional experiment on the genre, and so for that level, I have a feeling it's going to have legs and be something we come back to and go, wow, this is really interesting, because we've already seen these movies. On the other side of it, as just an audience member, and I'm someone who loves, Friday 13th movies, there's a part of me that at halfway through is like, I'd also be happy if this turned into just the normal slasher I want. So what it does is it keeps the slasher generic characters, which they are really generic in this, but I think purposely so. They're like in the background, so there's still all the shit you would see in a Friday 13th is happening, but it's not really focused on. It's almost like he's watching from the shadows, and they're having these stupid conversations, and then he's following them and killing them, one by one, just like a slasher. But because you're positioned with this character, and none of this is spoilery, it's not really that kind of film. It creates a feeling that you missed the thing that it is talking about, but on that level, that's not to say it's not cool. It's actually really fucking cool, because no one's ever done this before. So you're constantly, I was constantly in two places. It's kind of movie I'd also like to see it on a big screen to follow up, because I do think some of the kills, and it's got a very cinematic aesthetic to it. Either way, this is one of the most interesting horror movies of the year, period. Like, even if you found yourself coming out of it and bored, I think a slasher fan has to see it, even if they come away with, oh, that wasn't what I thought it'd be. I think it's still just too interesting not to watch.
Wow. Okay.
Very unique. Very unique.
I'm ready to go. Okay, I've got a couple of books I will talk about
Okay.
quickly. So it was free comic book day, so I got all types of free comic books, but by far the coolest, we got the multiple worlds of James Tinian the Fourth, which I love just because you and I are big fans of a lot of his projects, so that one was really cool. So yeah, some fun stuff from free comic book day that I posted about online. And then I have three books that I wanted to mention. The first one, graphic novel. This I loved. This was so good. This is Know Your Station by Sarah Gailey, and the art was done by Linnea Kangas. And the setup of this one is it is a girl who has gotten a job as a security officer for a kind of 1% starship. Like it's set in the future. The world has been decimated by ecological problems, environmental problems. It's a shit show. So all of the 1%ers of the world have built these massive spaceships, these luxury spaceships, and they just live on luxury spaceships all the time because they don't want to have to live down here. And so she has been hired on as a security person on this 1% spaceship. But the thing is, they don't really commit crimes. Like there's no real crime happening. So she's not trained at all. She's not really done anything. She's got some drug addiction problems. Like she basically just shows up and, doesn't really have to do much until there's a murder. And then all of a sudden, all these different really wealthy people on her spaceship start dying. And she has to figure out what's going on while all the deaths are still happening. This was really cool, dystopian. I'd read, Sarah has a prior novel called Eat the Rich that I loved that was very kind of tonally similar, where it is kind of this commentary on class differences, but it's still very comedic in its delivery. This was just awesome. So it's not a horror as in supernatural, but definitely like really fucking graphic murder mystery. When I say these people are getting murdered, it's not like, they're just getting stabbed and left in a hallway, like strung up, organs decorated over a couch. Like these are brutal murders. And the way that they're setting it up, it can't be anybody. Like they're inhuman the way that these murders are happening, where they're happening within seconds and things like that. So I only read the first volume. It's going to keep going a little bit. And yeah, I'm excited to kind of see where it goes from there. Okay, so continuing on. This one I wanted to talk about, Raising the Dead, the work of George A. Romero by Adam Hart. I wanted to mention this because this is a more kind of academic book that came out from Oxford, but for Romero fans, this was a really cool read where it touches on his films, but it also gets really deep into a lot of the psychology behind his movies. It gets into his cinematic style. It gets into his kind of themes that he's always going with, like confronting corporations and social issues and class and race and religious beliefs and things like that. So if you are a super Romero fan, this was a really cool kind of theoretical look at a lot of his films. So
Was
this is
it
Raising the Dead.
Sorry, was that one just the zombie movies or all Romero films?
This is all
Oh,
Romero.
okay. Then I'm definitely, because I'm
Yeah.
a huge fan of those, especially the non-zombie ones are so fascinating.
Yeah, like there's a chunk of it. I think like the first third kind of focused on the zombie
of course,
stuff,
yeah.
but then after that, it gets really
cool.
diversified into everything else that he's doing. Yeah, and it gets into, even because this guy has clearly done a lot of kind of archival and research work on Romero, it gets into like a lot of the ideas that he didn't fully flesh out, or kind of just, the sheer breadth of amount of stuff that he had going on constantly. So Romero was one of those people where when you look back at his work, that it's not always easy to identify where a lot of the ideas come out of, because he always was creating so much. So Raising the Dead, the work of George A. Romero. And then last,
I was going to say
I
was just going to say a 4K restoration just got done of Bruiser, and that's one of the ones I've only seen once when it first came out.
I've only seen that once.
Yeah, and it didn't make much of an impression when like the year it came out, but I'm like very curious to rewatch that one just because it was kind of one of the more interesting things he did at the end. So yeah,
I don't even remember.
I just remember The Mask.
I just remember I'd seen it and The Mask, and that's all I've got. So yeah,
we got to rewatch
that one. Okay, last one I wanted to talk about. You'll notice I haven't even finished this, but I'm gonna finish it over the weekend, and I'm fucking loving it. So I wanted to at least mention it because it just came out today. So as we're recording this on Wednesday, by Friday it will have been out 2 days. But this is The Hunter's Daughter by Nikola Slavinik. And this one is just getting released from Berkeley. This cover does not do this book justice. Like, this cover tells me absolutely nothing. And if I was like perusing the horror section at Barnes and Noble and saw this cover, I would not even think twice about it, or The Hunter's Daughter. But I am digging this book. It is about a female cop in a small town. And one day she pulls up to a domestic dispute. The guy comes out. He has clearly just shot his wife or girlfriend. And he comes out with shotgun, fires it at her. She fires back and she kills him. But it sets off, and I mean, it was very much like, she was justified. There was a lot going on. He had just killed his wife. He was shooting her, and she gets shot. As she is recovering from her injury, she starts remembering all these things about her childhood, about how she had spent all this time with her father in the woods. And she starts remembering her dad. And basically what she unpacks in the first couple of chapters is that her dad was a serial killer, and that she changed her identity long ago to try to get away from his background. He was known as the Forest Strangler. And he spent all this time in the woods with her, hunting and teaching her everything about how to survive in the woods. But at the same time, he was killing women and sacrificing them to this forest god that he believed existed. And so he was staging the bodies and treating all of these women he was killing as this sacrifice to this forest god. And then years later, he was arrested, labeled the Forest Strangler. She created a new identity and became a cop because she wanted to help people and wanted to get far away from that. But after she kills that guy and is recovering from her own gunshot wound, murders start happening again. And she begins questioning her memories of, was dad just a serial killer, or was there something bigger? And I love this so far because it is not only blending serial killer trauma, like a serial killer horror story, but it's folk horror as well. Like, it's really kind of riding both those veins at the same time, where at one point you think it's just a serial killer story. She's just suddenly the serial killer has come back. And then you get this next chapter that is like this strong injection of folk horror, where they're pulling people's eyeballs out and putting chestnuts in them and flowers everywhere. And oh my God, how did this happen? And so I love the fact that it is a folk horror masking as a serial killer story. Again, I'm only halfway through it. So Hunter's Daughter, you better not do me wrong now as I'm talking about how awesome you are on the show. But I am just really enjoying this. And it's gotten really high reviews online. So I'm hoping that it continues its punch. But it'll take me another week to finish it. So I wanted to mention it now.
Yeah,
and so this is The Hunter's Daughter, just released a really beautiful mix of serial killer horror and folk horror all at the same time.
And you can follow what we are reading over on the Goodreads app, right? That's a good place to do it. I'm a convert. I'm on my 12th book. I'm on my 13th book right now.
What are you reading?
I'm reading another Malfi. This one's 5 novellas inside it called They Lurk. I read that because I'm waiting for the new one of his Small Town Horror to come out. So until that,
I have a copy. Yeah. It should get here, or it should be here this week.
I need it. I've read 4 of his novels this year. He's my favorite of the year, so I just love it.
I told the publicist, I was like, we're kind of big fans.
I'd love to get him on. So if we can get a copy, I'm really enjoying his writing. His writing style's just got me. That one's good. And I did want to give a quick shout out. If you're looking for a new podcast on film, Paul McAvoy, who's been around forever on the Fright Fest circuit, has one called Stark Raving Cinema with Benson and Moorhead kicking off. But I saw a big press release about it, which is cool. So good for them because they've been doing this for so many years. So
wait, so Benson and Moorhead they're like the guests?
Yeah, Paul McAvoy's the host, and it's produced by a film director whose name I forgot, but he did a lot of interesting movies in the 90s, and it's just like all on cinema. I think it's kind of from the London perspective and Fright Fest, but seemed like a cool thing, so I thought might as well give it a plug.
That is awesome.
Yeah. Okay. So
let's do this.
Yeah. So we're on limited time today, but we pivoted our show from a topic we were going to do because 2 days ago we lost arguably the most important. Well, not arguably the most important independent filmmaker of all time, undoubtedly, but also probably just one of the most important presences in the film industry to change the model forever. Roger Corman, right?
Yeah, Roger Corman, he really got his start. Like, it's honestly kind of the collapse of vertical integration that did it, where like right at the end of the 1940s, when everything fell apart with the studio system, we see this massive rise of independent filmmakers. And really leading the pack was folks like Roger Corman, who immediately by early to mid 1950s were just churning films out. And most of them were what we would look at now as like drive-in fare. It was a lot of teen movies, it was a lot of sci-fi, it was a lot of aliens from beyond. But he was doing it, and he was doing it really, really well, and just churning these movies out, all really low budget, but almost entirely made for drive-ins. And then he kept doing it for decades, like literally looking at his IMDb today. Damn, I wish I still had my notes in front of me. He had just finished, executive producing a film a couple of years ago. And
no, I think he's still got upcoming credits. Like, I mean,
he's got upcoming credits. Yeah. Like
he's going in
his
98 or whatever it was,
Yeah, like his company is still kicking. And we had just had him on, I don't remember if it was Shockwaves or Killer POV, but he had done one of our shows just a couple of years ago. Like it was not that long ago.
Did Corman ever go on our show?
Was he on, or did I interview him for? I know I had
Fango. I can't remember now, but I had him on my first show.
Fango.
Yeah, me and Stacey Lane way back. We had probably the best episode I ever put together of one of those things was Jeffrey Combs on the first half talking about Nevermore. This was the video show we did this weekend, and then Corman came on the second half, and it was just like it got like what's it called when back in the day when iTunes would pick a podcast to put the picture of, it actually made that. And so we were looking at numbers that went from like unknown show to like it was insane, just because it was right when Sharktopus was being made. But he lasted many trends. What makes him so unique is he was always both setting trends and answering to them. He gave the audience what they wanted, and that's something he really understood. Like, there's no pretension about Roger Corman. This is somebody who could have made in my opinion, his best film is a film called The Intruder. It's not going to be on our list today because it's this like under the radar American masterpiece about race and a grifter stirring up racial controversy in a small town in America. It's the only film of his when he made it. He directed it. It didn't make money. So it put him off. Yeah. It has finally apparently cleared. If you watch the documentary about him, it finally started to but of all his other movies, he could instantly see if they're connecting because the drive-in circuits were so fast. I heard the funniest thing that Joe Dante and Alan Arkush were talking about on some podcast last week before he died. So I was a little shocked. They're talking about working in the trailers for him. And they said what Roger would do is he'd put a movie out to the drive-in and then they'd recut it. And by the time it went back out, they might have given it a new name. And so people would be seeing the same movies. That's no problem at drive-in. But what happened, he said a couple times that really pissed people off, is it became the first film and this double feature was the same movie with a different title. So imagine going to the drive-in and sitting there watching two back-to-back movies, exactly the same, but because the distributors didn't realize that the title had changed. And so any way to make a buck. I mean, this guy, he wrote one of the greatest books about the film industry, in my opinion. I Never Lost a Dime. I love that book.
One of my favorite things is that he would sell things based on a poster.
Oh, yeah.
And it's still, the idea of selling stuff on a concept is still done to a degree. Like if you go to some of the film markets, like AFM, American Film Market, is one that still happens. It was in Santa Monica. I think they're moving to Vegas now. But that was the one place where I still saw films being bought and sold on poster concepts alone. But Corman did it. Corman was literally going to drive-ins across America and being like, a man turned inside out, and they'd be like, okay.
Oh, yeah,
and that was it. And he would have to go make the movie. And so when he was going back to his filmmakers, he'd be like, do whatever you want. Just make sure there's a man who gets turned inside out somewhere in there. And that was kind of it. And so that is what Corman became in the film world most legendary for, is he would hire film students fresh out of school or filmmakers who were just starting to cut their teeth. And the Corman model became film school for a lot of famous folk. Yeah. Joe Dante, Martin Scorsese, Penelope Spheres.
The list is
Stephanie Rothman.
Insane. So the core, I agree. I think and Jonathan Demme, the Corman school is probably the biggest part of the legacy. And when we get into it, we're just going to pick 5 films each and do kind of like a 10 film draft, very brief. But again, we're only scratching the surface because he's worked on hundreds. But there's the other wing, and I think maybe outside of those things, the biggest thing he added was he was the first. So he was doing drive-in fare, he's doing horror schlock, But then in the 60s, he realized there was a hole that no one was bringing these films that were winning Cannes and all the European awards, all the art house films, Fellini, Bergman, none of these films were being distributed in America. So he saw this other lane and he liked those movies. He was like, serious movies. He is the reason we have any of the Criterion Channel today. It is because Roger Corman brought those films to America. And there's a letter, I love it so much, that Ingmar Bergman wrote to Roger Corman where he's like, without you, no one would have ever seen, like, they were playing my movies in drive-ins. Like, this was a dream for me to see these movies, because people think art house people want to just be like art house to the left. They want people to see their movies. They are no different than any filmmaker. And so I think Corman's legacy of bringing those movies and the influence then that had on the Hollywood New Wave and people like Coppola. The craziest thing, I read a Coppola tribute yesterday. So Francis Ford Coppola, I'm looking at the news and everyone's going, he's so old, he's probably not even going to get to see his movie Megalopolis hit theaters and blah, blah, blah. And everyone's waiting for him to just keel over. And then Francis goes, when I first met Roger, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, after all, Roger is 13 years older than me. And I was like, oh my God, 13 years. So Roger is 13 years older than the guy that everyone's just expecting to drop any second. And I'm like, that tells you that Roger was going and still making movies at 98. So we throw around the term GOAT a lot, but man, I don't know. Roger Corman's one of the ones who I think is in our lifetime to be able to have been alive, to have seen his work, to have met the person, even though it's brief. And I did just realize I actually am in one of his films because it turns out that Camel Spiders is executive produced by Roger Corman.
Oh, hell yes, you are.
I didn't realize it till today.
My favorite Roger Corman story is we were doing one of the Fangoria Weekend of Horrors, and I had not been with the company. I'd only been there a couple of years at the time, but we had booked Roger Corman as a guest. And my mom really wanted to come to one of the conventions, and she was like, let me help. And so we put my mom in the ticket booth. And so she was like literally working the ticket booth the whole time. And one night after hours, I had been working in an event and I came out and my mom, Roger Corman, and Julie Corman, his wife, were sitting in the cafe of the hotel having tea together. And my mom was like, I just met this lovely couple in the elevator and they were so lovely. And I just sat down and we had a drink together. And then it wasn't until I walked away, I was like, Mom, that you just had like coffee with Roger Corman. And she was immediately like, oh my God. Like even she made the connection between, once I started saying what some of his films were, like she remembered them from her childhood, like just such a legend. But he was always still so down to earth enough to have coffee with random women he just met in the elevator.
It was wonderful coffee, Bekah. Thank you. Wonderful. He had the most memorable delivery, I think, of any person I've met. Yeah. Wonderful. We cannot possibly do it justice in this amount of time, but we are going to just give you some tease. So as if you want to pay tribute, I would start with the documentary on him, which is just absolutely incredible. I can't remember what the tagline is, but the Roger Corman documentary, you'll find it streaming almost anywhere. And it has one of the best heartfelt. It was the last time Jack Nicholson did one of these things where he's being interviewed about someone, because there's a part where he actually gets teary and talking, and it's really like knocks you out how kind of emotion. You just realize this guy gave so many people a start, and he wasn't doing it just out of the goodness of heart. He saw talent and he let it go, and that changes the model. And young woman producers and directors.
The thing I was going to say, absolutely, is in the 70s and 80s, at a time when women were not exactly being welcome into above the line roles, Roger Corman was letting them. Like I interviewed Stephanie Rothman on this, and she was like, Roger didn't care what your gender was. He cared that you could make a film in 14 days on budget, and that was it. And the gender element meant nothing to him. And so a lot of the people that he gave early starts, especially if we're looking at like Penelope Spheres, Humanoids of the Teeth, things like that, Slumber Party Massacre, these are female directors who would not have gotten an opportunity had it not been for Roger Corman.
Now, he's a really smart person, and I think a smart person who is open-minded to how there's not more than one way to make a buck, and I think he started to realize that talent and youth went a long way for working for him. So, wonderful career. We're gonna go. If one of us says something that's higher on theirs, we'll do the bump thing. Otherwise, hopefully we don't have too much crossover because you don't even have notes. This is going to be wild.
I don't. Wait, are we drafting 10?
Yeah, we're going to draft. And we'll go back and forth. So you go first, and I'm doing like a deep cut at my last one, so it shouldn't be a problem. We might have some crossover. Okay. So number 10.
I I am going to kick off, and shit, I didn't pull the year up really quick,
That's fine.
but
I'll look it up for you because I know yours.
Great. I am going to kick off with The Velvet Vamp.
Oh, cool.
And this is Stephanie Rothman. I wanted to make sure that I had one of her films on here. She did a couple for Corman. I love this because it's like Corman does Eurotrash vamp. Where it is supposed to be this kind of like sexy vamp, like we were seeing kind of Jean Rollin vampires, where she is this kind of flowing seductress, but she is in the middle of the Mojave Desert, like Joshua Tree area, with a dune buggy. And that kicks ass. And it is a couple who is vacationing, and they kind of meander onto her, and she's like, oh yes, come back to my palatial estate, and then suddenly they're betwixt. And so it's got this kind of Eurotrashy Daughters of Darkness, Vampiros Lesbos feel to it, but we're in the middle of the desert with a dune buggy and this absolutely glowing seductress of a vampire in these really gauzy chiffon numbers. So I love this. Is Stephanie Rothman, female director, one of my favorite female directors from this time period, just really doing her thing. And it's a vampire film through and through, but I love those Eurotrashy type trappings of it. So what year is this?
That's 71.
Like 71. Okay, yeah.
And Corman's roles in this will range from like producer when he's fully producing a movie, executive producer, very, very many titles, and then even distribution producer, which sometimes probably means a pickup. We don't care. Whatever he touched is fine with us. I will file my later one as a what? Sorry.
I'll quickly say that when I talked to Stephanie about this one, it was what I talked about, where she was like, Velvet Vamp was required to be the title. I was not allowed to change that. The poster already was there, which the poster for Velvet Vampire, it's like a topless vampire with her hair flowing over her boobs, and she's holding up two heads. Not in the movie. Exactly. Like not in that sense. But she said that basically she was given title, and this is what the poster is going to look like, and it should be sexy, and go do your thing. And that was it. And then you're off, and you've got a budget, and that's it, as long as you can deliver on time.
Yeah, no, exactly. So many movies were made like that. I file this one under Roger probably doesn't even know he's got a credit on it because he probably had so many. So this is probably a lesser, but I wanted to put one deep cut in there because it's such a fun, it's one of my favorite genres, which is the Deliverance ripoff genre. This one's called Hunter's Blood. Director Robert Hughes from 86. And the reason I became aware of this movie is because Clu Gulager is in this and kicks so much ass in this movie that it's like one of my favorite of his things. So this is a group of hunters who are just a bunch of nice guys there. There's a father and son. It's Sam Bottoms, Clu Gulager, and a couple other guys. They're going to go to the backwoods, have some drinks, do some hunting. They, on their way out there, they stop at this kind of redneck bar, and they kind of are insulting to some of the locals. This is the first appearance of Billy Bob Thornton when he was playing a character called Billy Bob. Guess which which side he's on, the redneck side. They go out into the forest, and they start basically being hunted by this group of people, and it gets real nasty. There's actually some pretty vicious kills. And I mean, Clu's really fun because he's like the kick-ass guy, the older guy who he's just like, no, screw this, let's take it to them and take them on. But at some point he gets injured and can't help the lesser. So he's kind of the Burt Reynolds, I guess, of this group. But the bad guys, Bruce Glover, which is Crispin's dad, who's fantastic, and Billy Drago, who's always, but I've never seen Billy Drago's usually like a psycho, but not like a backwoods psycho, because he almost looks like a slick Italian guy. So it's really weird to see him in the hillbilly genre.
I really think Billy Drago is like, because he did like X-Files, where he was also in the hillbilly genre, and he's really good. Yeah, he did.
House of Ice, he's in the
remember
redo, I think. Yeah.
I can't remember what the episode was, but I just remember he says the line, "Stanky's good," because he's talking about it's like magic and something smells bad.
I guess I think about Untouchables, and he's wearing such a good suit, and he's like the best bad guy ever in the Untouchables. So anyway, this is a really fun one. It's way off the radar because it hasn't even got a release. You'd probably have to watch it on YouTube. It should have a release. It's a really
Hunter's Blood never got a release.
No, Hunter's Blood doesn't. It might have a DVD release, but it's not got anything since then. Yeah. Now we talked about it on Pure Cinema, but it's so good.
Yeah, the VHS cover from that I remember so vividly. Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen that movie.
You enjoy it. It's just fun in all those ways. And I'll watch anything with Clue, but anyway, I wanted at least one lesser known one on here. So that's our number 9. At number 8,
I'm going left field here. Again, we're looking for ones that are not just horror, but are also kind of exploitation-y and basically like Corman's greatest hits. So I wanted to put in at 8 Rock and Roll High School.
Oh, great film.
Because this is, so many stars in this. It is Corman always had a pulse on the teen market.
Yeah.
Like from 1950s, which we're going to talk about in a bit. I have one of those I want to play. How he had his finger on the drive-in market, but then we're going all the way up to 79 now, and he is still somehow making films that kind of summarize teendom. So this is 79. This was the Ramones when the Ramones had kind of just gotten started and really making a name for themselves. And it is about a group of students who kind of take over their school, and the Ramones are involved in it. And it's just all about being punk rock. This movie gives us PJ Souls, Clint Howard
in a bathroom as a lawyer called Eaglebauer or whatever.
Yeah, it's got Clint Howard, Mary Warnock, Dick Miller is in this. Dick Miller's in a lot of Roger Corman films. But this one, I remember seeing this when I was in high school in the 90s and still being like, this movie fucking kicks ass. It rocks. Like, this is such a punk rock movie. And it just is so fun, and just kind of, I love that Roger Corman is able to kind of somehow kind of target, exploit, and capitalize the teen markets throughout multiple generations of teens and keep it going. So I really wanted to include this because this was one of those I owned on VHS when I was in high school, and it was a very important movie to me.
Yeah, it's one of the most fun movies ever. And it also just, that goes to show, because I highly doubt Roger understands it. I think he's just working with young people and trusting their taste and letting them impact him, which I think led to a much longer career. So that was number
8, Rock and Roll High
7,
School.
I have to play the original Slumber Party Massacre because I just love this film. Director Amy Holden Jones, somebody he worked with again. There's one that she directed for him that Brian's a big fan of, and I was going to watch it before the show. I've never seen Love Letters with Jamie Lee Curtis. It's apparently really good, and it's like a
Jamie Lee Curtis was in a Corman.
Yeah, it's a Jamie Lee Curtis, awesome. Amy Holden Jones film. I need to see it. I really wanted to see it for this. I've heard multiple people say how great it is. Kind of like I think there might be some thriller element. Anyway, that one looks good. I like Amy Holden Jones a lot. I love the Cassia Tone soundtrack. This was written by Rita Mae Brown to be a parody teen slasher, and just before they started making it, they were like, actually, we don't want the parody. Let's just make a straight slasher. But I think because of that, it's still funnier than a normal slasher and more satirical than a normal slasher. The killer is literally a tool, like, on both ways, use of the words. I mean, it's really funny. Pizza guy, the neighbor, it just has so many quotable things. And this is like when I think of the fun 80s version of what they were doing, this is, one of the best. And the sequel's equally cool.
Yeah, and I actually had Slumber Party Massacre as part 2 as one that I wanted to mention, because I find part 2 is just a blast. But part 1, listening to Amy Holden Jones talk about it, like, it was so much about kind of the phallicness of everything, of making it feel like a feminist slasher film from the eyes of the female looking at these incredibly phallic slashers, and that's why she gave it like the drill as the murder weapon of choice and things like that. So, and even just kind of thinking about, holy shit, like, you were getting really smart, ahead of the curve on kind of pushing these slasher films to be feminist, but doing it through a Corman film, because you were given this kind of flexibility and, able to do what you wanted with it. So that's beautiful.
So fun.
Yeah. No, Slumber Party Massacre 2 also an absolute hoot. That one does go way more horror comedy. It becomes kind of a rockabilly slasher. I love The Killer in Slumber Party Massacre 2. I don't hate 3, I will say.
I need to watch 3 again. I was underwhelmed by 3 the first time I saw it, but 2 is like dream scenes and bigger, bolder,
It's still underwhelming compared to 2. Yeah. Like, 1, super serious, just a damn good slasher in its own right. 2 goes comedic, but it does it like super bold, amazing visuals, and just kind of goes for, just goes for the throat. 3, comparatively, is not the best, but it's not bad. It's not as bad when I rewatched it a number of years ago as I remembered it being from when I was a kid.
I would also bet you any money that at that time in the 80s, it's probably the only trilogy ever directed all by 3 different women in the history of cinema.
I would guarantee.
Even now, it might be the only trilogy of that would be interesting. But back then, 100%, because each one. So, and by different ones. So it wasn't like one successful woman got to then make 3 movies. No, each one was a different female director. So interesting.
Yeah. Okay, at number 6, I am putting in The Trip
Oh, cool.
from
Great movie.
1967. So Corman was always kind of ahead of the curve of everything. And right around the mid 60s, we start seeing kind of inklings coming out in the news, in teen groups about LSD being this new scary thing that your teens experimenting with. And for a while, it wasn't really being reflected. We see like it makes an appearance in the Tingler, but it's still very much like a scientific chemical basis. And then for Corman to come out and be like, let's make a movie about what a trip is. And it feels so goddamn exploited, but it still feels really cutting edge. And it kicked off what I will lovingly call drug exploitation, is kind of the term that it has been bulkily given for years, of this genre of films that happens around the mid to late 60s and continues into the 70s, where the focus of them is the idea of the drugs, of the trip, of what type of crazy stuff. Like Acid Eaters is one of my faves. I love these drug exploitation films, but The Trip really does it. And it is kind of half documentary, where it feels like a lot of it is kind of explaining what acid is and how it works. And then it takes you on a trip. And then it's just like really fucked up wild visuals for like a solid 45 minutes. And it's just doing something so cutting edge and weird that I love that Corman, once again, kind of ahead of the curve on everything and not afraid to talk about the shit that nobody else wanted to talk about, or nobody else wanted to put on screen, or nobody else really wanted to address. He was very much, well, if the kids are doing acid, let's get some of that on screen. And he did.
Well, and a great cast. You've got Bruce.
Oh yeah, Dennis Hopper.
Yeah, I think Jackson there. But the one that I always think of is Bruce Dern. He has like in that movie, he has the best beard. He has like this really bushy beard. He's got like a green or a colored what is it called, with the high neck sweater.
Ascot?
No, like a sweater.
Oh,
turtleneck. Yeah, turtleneck and a jacket. And anytime I've seen this movie, I'm always like, man, that's like my fashion goal. And Peter Fonda. So effectively, this is like it's right before Easy Rider. It's 67, so it's a year and a half before they would have been making Easy Rider, which Corman is also
but this is
a
the
big part
Easy
of.
Rider team.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So he's like probably directly leads to Easy Rider, and Easy Rider changes film history, literally changes the studio system. So, and Corman's a part of that. So it is fascinating. Speaking of driving though, the next one is definitely the first Corman I saw when I was young. It's one of my all-time favorites, and that is Death Race 2000.
Hell yes.
Paul Bartel, who makes just darkly funny and weird movies. He's like, I think his humor is what's his standout. He's an actor as well, of course. This is a dystopian future cross-country automobile race where your souped-up cars basically have to run down innocent pedestrians for points on like a national game show, essentially. And just one of my favorite screen presence is David Carradine, who I didn't realize this, but the reason he took this, and he's playing a disfigured guy called Frankenstein. He's like the hero of this racing thing. He took it because it was like 3 days after his 5-year run on Kung Fu ended, and he's like, I needed something to change my image because I was so sick of being Kung Fu guy. So he rolled right into this leather-clad badass. Him racing against Sly Stallone, Mary Warnoff, Roberta Collins is hilarious in this. There's characters like Matilda the Hun, Calamity Jane, Nero the Hero. It's just a fun, crazy movie, but I think it's a great example of what Corman did, because what Paul Bartel delivered was basically a comedy, and Corman watches that movie and goes, no, usually we think of this as the bad producer who forces you to do a reshoot, forces them to do these really gory death scenes, but you have to look back and go, he was right. Like, that's the movie this needed to be. Those are my favorite scenes in the movie now, and they really push the limits of this kind of thing, and it's what the audience wanted. And so I think it is hard as filmmakers, it's hard to ever think that somebody else might be more right than you about your work, but I also think Corman really had a knack for knowing what audiences wanted, and so his reshoots on this, I think, made the film a lot more entertaining, and why we still watch it today.
Hell yes. Okay, so that takes us to number 4, and I'm going with Bucket of Blood.
Of course, you had to. Yeah, I know. I knew it.
Yeah, Elric knows this is one of my favorite films, and I still look at this as one of the greatest horror comedies ever made. Dick Miller plays a artist who is desperate to break into the beatnik scene. He is desperate to be part of the art scene, and he can't. He's just down on his luck, and nobody really wants him there. But then one night he accidentally kills his landlady's cat. And he says, you know what? I think I can make this into something. And to cover up the fact that he has killed this cat, he covers it in plaster. And then somebody sees it and is like, holy shit, that's art. And then he starts killing people and covering them in plaster and turning them into art. The whole thing is comedic, but specifically the whole thing is one giant commentary on kind of the ludicrousness of the art world and in this case, it's the late 50s. So it's beatniks of them doing poetry readings and sitting around talking about what is art and what is not, and treating him like a refined artist when in actuality, he's just taking dead bodies and like smashing plaster on them. But people are treating him, and all of a sudden, like the ladies are flocking to him, and he's getting all these new opportunities. But at the same time, he has to keep killing to keep doing the art. This is a satire through and through because it is just making one giant commentary on the art scene. When I first saw this film, it was much later. I was living in New York. It's when I was working for Fangoria in New York. And I was specifically seeing what I'll call the rise of the Brooklyn hipster was a thing. This would have been like 2000 aughts into like the 2006, 7, 8 era. And suddenly we were seeing this kind of rise of the Brooklyn hipster. And it was like I was watching the most contemporary film ever because it was all about, I like this because it's old. Does it work? No. But it's old, and it's ironic that I like it because it's old. And when they're talking about this stuff in the movie, and then I'm seeing these people with like vintage cardigan sweaters and their little like, you know, spiral mustaches and old cameras, I'm like, oh my God, this is it. This is literally like it was written yesterday. So I have always found this to be such a topical classic movie about the art scene, and it never changes. It's always like that,
and it's why we get Dick Miller and Gremlins. Otherwise he wouldn't be there.
And the Burbs.
Everything Joe Dante. Okay, number 3 I think is just a stone cold classic. Again, taking risks on new filmmakers. Film critic Peter Bogdanovich was just a film critic. He wanted to make a movie. Corman said, all right, I'll give you $100,000 as long as you have to use stock footage from the film The Terror that we have, and you have to hire Boris Karloff for 2 days. You have 2 days with Karloff. So whatever you write, you can do anything. So he came up with a movie called Targets. This film's better. I saw this one as young. I didn't really get it. I watched it a few years ago after Once Upon a Time in Hollywood came out because it was you can see a bit of an influence of it because it's a guy driving around listening to car radio a lot. And it is a masterpiece. It is stunning how refined a movie Bogdanovich made with those limitations. He makes it basically, it's Boris Karloff as an aging horror actor playing himself more or less, who's going to be appearing live in person at a drive-in as part of his kind of end of his career, more or less. So that's one storyline you're following. You're seeing people in a screening room watching parts of The Terror, giving notes on the movie. And then it cuts to this guy, this young man and his home life, where he seems just like a normal American guy, clean cut American guy, weird, family dynamics don't seem that strained. And then suddenly things get darker and darker. And by a certain point, he's going to kill his family and then drive to the drive-in, set up a gun on a tower and start shooting people live at this event. So the two stories are coming together. And there is some very, it feels so modern. Like it feels today. You watch it now and you're like, man, the filmmaking is just so cutting edge of what he's doing. And it's a pretty scary movie, actually. I really think it's one of the best things Corman produced, especially just how it came together. And then Bogdanovich would go on to be one of the most important filmmakers in the 70s, especially, and not returning to this kind of genre ever again, really. This was his kind of launch. But yeah, if you haven't seen this, this is one I would definitely recommend for people because it held up really well. So that's Targets.
At number 2, I am going with Tomb of Lygia. I wanted to get in at least one of the Poe Corman cycles, because he did this amazing thing in the 60s where he was dusting off these public domain Poe films and putting Vincent Price in every single one of them. Fall of House of Usher is great. I love a lot of these, but I've always been really partial to Tomb of Lygia, which is Vincent Price is getting remarried after his old wife has died, and her cat is still hanging around the house, and he's determined that his wife is now inside this cat. I love this one because it's visually lush. It's got a lot of horror to it, but at the same time, it's hilarious. Like I still remember Vincent Price's line, I threw a cabbage at a cat this afternoon who may have been my wife, or something like that. Like it's got these clearly comedic moments in it, but it still works as a horror film well. And it's just so beautiful. So any of these Poe Corman cycles work. Fall of House of Usher, again, super awesome. But this one, I love Tomb of Lygia.
Yeah.
And number one Corman film.
Well, I think if Corman had been remembered for only that's the incredible thing about his career. We didn't even really talk about the Poe adaptations then. If he had only made them, he would be completely remembered because they were these incredible. I've seen a great interview with it where he talked about the psychological aspects of them using color. Number one to me, I truly, outside the intruder, I think his best film, Mask of the Red Death. It is the opposite of Tomb of Lygia because it is dead fucking serious. This is like an art. Now, I think a big part of it is his collaborator on this is Nicholas Roeg before he became a director. And so this visually is one of the most he shot this film. So it's the color in this movie is stunning. And the writer of it is the guy who wrote that guy Charles Beaumont who wrote Night of the Eagle, which we both love. So and he did a lot of Twilight Zone and he wrote The Intruder. So I think he's got his I like all the Poe adaptations. I think they're all I just think this one's like on an artistic level shows just what Corman could have done if being a director was ultimately what was most important to him, which it clearly was not by the end. Like this shows as a director, wow, you made this incredible visual dread poem. And then you could still walk away and then produce for another 60, 70 years after this movies for other people. Again, this is Vincent Price in a very different role, playing the evil Prince Prospero, who passes through a village suffering from the Red Death, condemns a couple guys to death, falls in love with their sister, brings her to the court, tries to corrupt her. We find out he's a Satanist. We find, it's Jane Asher and Hazel Court who just utterly stunning, especially in this kind of beautiful color photography. And slowly we start to see a guest arrive who brings the Red Death to the doorstep of this Prince Prospero. And it's a very bleak, dark tone, but it's also just when people do those movies with parties and drinking and Satanists enjoying themselves, often they feel like bullshit. This one totally delivers, and I really think it's kind of the apex of what Corman was able to do as a director. Anyway. This is our rushed, version.
Yeah, and I know that there are some horror fans writing right now that we did not mention Chopping Mall, which is probably one of his biggest hits of the 1980s.
Yeah, Piranha's a masterpiece.
Piranha. I have to give love because the poster's right behind me to Unholy Rollers, which is one of my faves as well. Definite love to Wasp Woman, I've mentioned before. Little Shop of Horrors, of course. Cockfighter, which I know is a fave.
I was going away from the exploitation. I went more to the horror ones. This one, just because. But yeah, Cockfighter's all-time favorite. All the films.
Dunwich Horror. Yeah, Deathstalker is another one.
He did westerns.
Any of the Monty Hellman films are great.
He did too many movies to expect an accurate thing. It's more just to give you a taster and to pay tribute to one of the great ones. And I'm glad we were able to do that, even though it was a pivot from our topic. But he deserves a pivot.
Always. So thank you guys so much for listening to our rather off the cuff show tonight as we shipped topics late and my computer died. So I had no outlines to go off of, but that's okay. We made it work. So thank you guys so much for listening. If you want some of crazy deep cuts, and man, I have been watching some weird stuff this week, head on over to our Patreon show, Deep Cuts, and you will get 2 shows a month on our Off Weeks from Colors. We're over there delivering the weirdest of the weird and some wild deep cuts that we have to search for. So they're always really fun. And plus we're posting some cheat sheets over there, movie lists, and it's just fun. But if not, we will be back in another 2 weeks with another Fun Colors of the Dark. After that, we will be taking a break. Yeah, summer break. We're taking June off, but we will be back in July. So we got one more show and then summer break is coming. But thank you all so much for listening tonight. Have a phenomenal evening. The Colors of the Dark podcast is a Fangoria production. Producers and co-hosts are Rebekah, McKendry, and Elric, Kane. Executive producers are Tara Ainsley and Abby Gould. Sonic branding by Michael Rodriguez. And, of course, our amazing sound engineer, Ernie Hurtado.